Hello everyone, it's Julie Hutchison here from Think, Be, Do Leadership, and today is day 8 of 30 days of Communication Fest. 30 days of tips on how to improve your communication, your impact on your influence to grow your career, grow your business. And we are, like I said, on day 8. Day 8 is about vulnerability, dare I say it. And what I want to talk about is how vulnerability, when you're communicating and you want to make an impact and influence on somebody, is massively important, because if you're not vulnerable, then you will not get the result you want. You'll get a toxic result. So if you're listening to this live, then do say hello. Hello, everyone, if you're listening to the live. And if you're listening to replay, please put #replay in your comments, and then I will reply to them when I find them, because I will check. So, okay, why being vulnerable improves your results. So let me ask you this question. Have you ever felt like a bit of an idiot when you've had to, I don't know, when you were younger, this is me, stick your hand up in class and say you don't understand something? Or I had a chemistry teacher, his name was Mr. Evans, and he always made me feel like an idiot for not knowing the answer, which I rarely did because I didn't really like chemistry. And he always made me feel really silly, and he was quite short with me. He was actually quite short as well, but he was quite short with me, and I always felt like, oh my God, don't ask me the question, or I don't want to talk to you. I want to avoid you because you make me feel bad. And no one likes that. Nobody likes to feel silly. And so you end up avoiding things. Well, I do anyway, and people do. They avoid those situations because we don't want to be made to feel silly and small. Okay, and it's a little bit like, the emperor's new clothes. If the old emperor, he was walking around with no clothes on because he was told that if he was clever, he wouldn't be able to see these clothes, and only stupid people realised that he was naked. But the little boy come along and said, "Well, you got no clothes on," and it took somebody who wasn't scared of the king to stand up and say what was really going on. So it wasn't that he was really brave, it was just that he wasn't scared. So he was able to be vulnerable and say what needs to be said, because, he didn't really know any different. But the whole issue is that if you don't like feeling vulnerable and you don't like looking silly, it can mean that because you're avoiding, then other things come into play because of it. Okay, so let's have a look. What have I written here? Ooh, yeah. So hiding from that person, particularly hiding from people and not wanting to have the conversation, hiding from having, not from the person, but having the conversation. Maybe you've done that before. Now, this is a good one, being defensive. So my chemistry teacher, I think, was passive aggressive because he was being defensive, because he didn't want me to ask the question, because he didn't know how to answer me, because he wasn't very good at communication, and therefore he didn't like talking. So me asking a question made him feel awkward, and therefore he would be aggressive towards me and in defensive, because he wanted to push that away. He wanted to get rid of it. So we've got to look at, why are we doing this stuff? Yeah, so that's what it can lead to. Now, I like this one. I just mentioned aggressive, but passive aggressive is a big thing in organizations, where the culture starts to grow, where because we're not happy being vulnerable, we're not happy saying, oh, I'm not sure, or I made a mistake, or all those things, we don't want to say anything, so we don't say anything. But that means that we end up with a blame culture. Now, I've been in an organization with a very large blame culture. Shan't say which one. You could probably work it out. And when that happens, what it means is that everybody is closed and doesn't want to speak. They are looking to blame somebody else rather than they push the blame on somebody else. And therefore, the whole place gets very toxic. And of course, when this happens and we're not communicating, we're not happy to be vulnerable, and we know we're going to get stabbed in the back, then this culture isn't just internal. That internal culture then leads to external culture. Okay, so it leads to a more aggressive way of dealing with your customers or your clients. It leads to a more defensive way when customers ask you a question, instead of being open and genuinely, oh yeah, let's have a look at that, I don't know. Then it's much more about making them feel small, so they stop asking you the questions. And you might think, of course, nobody would do that, but it happens all the time. I was just on LinkedIn earlier on. You might be on LinkedIn now watching this. If not, you might be on Facebook. But I was on LinkedIn earlier on, and there's a lawyer who was saying about the courts cancelling things, and it was, it's really sad that the courts are struggling at the moment. But instead of being honest and open and communicating, they're not going to accept the blame. They're not going to explain. They don't communicate with anybody because it's not my fault. It's not my fault. And I think that's a culture that's coming out there, and it's really, really sad because everybody loses. Everybody loses. Customers, clients lose, and you lose in your business because if you're not being able to communicate really well, you're not creating relationships, and therefore you're not going to grow your business. So, okay, what am I going to say here then? Okay, somebody next door is now mowing their lawn. Apologies for that. That's my bit of vulnerability. So what I'm talking about is how do you get this vulnerability into your communication? That's what I'm trying to say. So I'm not talking about putting yourself down. I'm not talking about that kind of like feeling bad and not feeling good enough. That's not what I mean. What I mean is that it's okay to be wrong. It's okay not to know. And it's okay to show the other person that you don't know and that you might be wrong and that you're interested in them. Because the minute that you are open and honest and you say, I don't know, or I can't find that, or whatever, or oh no, I didn't do that, then when you do that, you open up the possibilities of conversation and understanding and empathy and relationship building, okay? Because it's all about trust. So it's definitely all about trust within your teams, within your business, but it's just as much about trust, and if not, I don't know if it's more, same, just as much about trust with your customers, your clients. And so if you think about it, people buy because, the good old adage, they know, like, and trust you, yeah, and people want to work with you because they know, like, and trust you. That's internal and external. And therefore, what you're trying to do is you're trying to build trust. So just thinking about that, well, you don't build trust if you're blaming people. You don't build trust if you can't be honest. You don't build trust if you're not open. You don't build trust if you pretend that everything's fine when it's not, or you're like super cool like my chemistry teacher. If you're not, it wasn't that cool. So we have to admit, and be vulnerable and say what's not working and what is working. And so it just made me think of another thing in the police when we used to have meetings. We used to have a briefing meeting where the intel department was supposed to come and brief us, but everybody was so scared of getting stabbed in the back or being looking a fool and not knowing something that every single one of those people, was probably about 20 in the room, used to go and spend an hour briefing themselves before they came to the briefing, which to me was just like 20 hours of wasted day that the public were paying for. And it used to drive me insane because we were all too scared to admit we didn't know, when in fact we weren't supposed to know. We were supposed to be being briefed. There you go, another example. If you've ever had anything like that, do let me know. Okay, so what I want you to think about is being vulnerable is going to help you. Okay, so when you get that in your head, that actually it's okay to say, then what that means is the other person who doesn't feel they can be vulnerable or doesn't trust you as much, then is able to say, oh, hold on a second. If Julie's being vulnerable, if Julie's admitting that she's not sure, or if Julie's saying, oh, I could be wrong, let's work it out together, then maybe I'm willing to say how I really feel, or I'm willing to say what I don't understand as well, or I'm willing to be a little bit more open. I'll be less defensive. I'll feel more like I want to work with Julie. Yeah. And so it makes a massive difference to how the person feels, how the person trusts you, if the person trusts you, and therefore then people can actually have better conversations. And when they have better conversations and more trust within the organization, then they're going to translate that to your customers and your clients. Okay, make sense? Yeah. Well, I think it does. If it doesn't make sense, tell me. And if it does make sense and you're listening, then tell me too. Okay, so there's three things. Okay, the first one is being able to be vulnerable. Now, the second thing, excuse me, is be first. It's important, I think. And what I mean by that is, look, if you're the leader or if you're listening to this, then you've chosen to grow your confidence in communication and your results, then it's down to you. Because I can't speak to everybody else and you can't speak to anybody else unless you do something. So remember, we're always saying behavior breeds behavior. So you change your behavior, other people's behaviors and beliefs and thoughts will change. Yeah, but you go first. Because when you decide to be vulnerable or be honest and open, however you want to say it, show your belly a little bit, not literally. I won't show mine. When you decide to do that first, then you create, you're in control of the situation, but also you're encouraging other people and they are going to trust you. Okay, you're going to be seen as a leader. You're going to be seen as the one who's doing this. So they're going to follow you and you're more likely to get the result you want anyway. Okay, so be vulnerable, be first. And what have I put here? Oh yeah, be kind. Now that's not some airy fairy on a cloud thing. I haven't joined social services yet. But what I mean is, you know, I said about the blame and the defensiveness and the passive aggressiveness. It's really easy, as we've talked about in a couple of other these sessions, to blame other people and to push blame outwards and push and highlight other people's faults because then that hides yours, or just, you know, what's the word? Divert attention to somebody else by pointing out the failings of other people. I bet you know somebody who does that because so many people do that, and it's really horrible for a start. But also, it doesn't really work because what we're talking about is creating relationships and having an impact and an influence on people that is positive, that builds your business, that builds your ability to be trusted. Well, of course, if you're doing that and you're not being kind, then it isn't going to happen because you're going to be like my chemistry teacher and you're going to, in the process of hiding your own failings, let's say, or trying to, you're going to be showing up your failings because you're going to be shown as being a mean person, and therefore nobody else is going to follow you. Nobody else is going to follow being vulnerable because you're making them feel unsafe, insecure, and they don't trust you. So they are not going to do what you want to do. So they're going to hide everything. It'll, you know, you'll never find out until the poop hits the fan that there was something wrong. Okay. So if they're not going to trust you, you need to create that trust. So being vulnerable, being first, and being kind. So looking for the good in people, looking for something that you can find that is good. And when somebody, please, when somebody admits they've done something wrong, or when somebody is vulnerable, open and honest, and you're like, oh, brilliant, they've told me, and it's not what you want to hear, remember to be kind, be understanding, and see, because if you ask them to be vulnerable and then you get your stick and you stab it in their belly, then they ain't going to do it again. Yeah? Okay. So when we create vulnerability, we open up trust, we are bringing up the communication that we want to bring, we're building relationships, and we're growing our business. Okay. If you have found that useful and you would like to find out more about how to implement this in your business for you and or your team, then I'm going to stick in the chat a link to booking a call with me so that you can have a discussion about how we can apply this in your situation. So maybe you've got team problems, maybe you've got a lack of trust, maybe people are not able to feel that they can be vulnerable and they're all hiding everything, and maybe that's causing you problems in your business. Maybe it's you and you want to be more confident about being a leader in your business. Give me a shout. The link hopefully has come out, but I can't see it on LinkedIn, so I'll post it later on as well. But if you have any questions, don't hesitate to give me a shout, just a message, or you can email me at julie@thinkbedoleadership.com. Okay, that's the end of day 8. 22 more to go. Hope you're finding it useful. And remember, you can always find me on YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook with all of the lives that I'm doing, or give me a shout and I'll send you over some of our free trainings. Take care. Have a lovely day.